Hi guys, welcome to our React Hooks. This is the latest concept in the React, although it's not very much latest, but if I talk about 2020, then it's around 9 to 8 months old. So this concept is actually doing a very good thing here. So if I talk about your JavaScript, right, we talk about what is React classes, functions, component with hooks, and what are React hooks. Basic hook, use state hook, counter application using state hook, use effect. Why use context hooks and how to write that? Rule to write React hooks. Now, why we move to the class-based component? What was the problem with the functional component? Means problem in terms of what was the shortcomings of a functional component. The point is like that your functional components are the one which are light in weight. It's really great. So the point is like that they have some issue with the way they maintain, means they cannot hold the state. That was one problem. And the second problem which they have is they don't have a lifecycle hooks. And as they don't have a lifecycle hook, then they cannot call the API. So point is like that, majorly you have to face a shortcome with the functional component, and that's why we move toward the class-based component. Now, what exactly is a use there? Now, what the hooks do? Actually, hooks has introduced some new things, new functions in the React, and what it actually do is with the help of hooks, all the shortcomings that was not there in the React in terms of like a class-based component only do those things, not the functional, is now overcome. So point is like that now it's completely possible that you don't have to go for the class-based component. You can do everything with just functional-based component. And going forward, what's going to happen is in near future, I will see that I say around after 1 year or so, people take out the Redux and use hooks for all your state management. And there are a lot of hooks like useReducer, useState, useEffect. Some of them we're going to do a demo also in this module. So let's begin. So first of all, let's understand that caveat of a JavaScript classes. Understand the functionality of this keyword to work within the class component. Remember to bind event handler in the class-based component. Means all these things we have to learn or remember to behave as class-based component. Other thing, while creating a component of a complex scenario such as data fetching and subscribing to event, we have to make use of different lifecycle methods. Data fetching done in component did mount and sometime in the component did update. For event listener, you set a component did mount and unsubscribed component will unmount. This lead to splitting the code as per the component lifecycle method and not as per the component functional use. The use of multiple components may not matter in terms of view structure, but can cause wrapper hell. So we have to maintain that class-based component, create a state component and initialize it to 0 and method to set the value. So we have one button on the click of that, we update that state. So counter application using a class component. Is it possible to work with a state without JavaScript classes? To simplify the application code, yes, you can write functional component with React hooks. So functional component with hooks are simpler and no need to define constructor, this keyword, lifecycle method, and destructuring the simple multiple times. So hooks does not split the component as per lifecycle method. Rather, they split the component into smaller function based on the related pieces. They organize logic into a component to reusable isolate units. They are easier to refactor and test allow developer to write clear and concise code. So React hooks are basically function that let us include React state and lifecycle feature without classes. They allow us to use feature of a stateful component in a functional component. They mainly deal with state, effect, and context in the React application. We need to ensure that order always stays the same. We cannot use hooks in loop or conditions. The basic hook used to implement the feature of a stateful component in the function component are majorly we use three hooks. One is useState, useEffect, and useContext. So useState is a one that help us to achieve the functionality of maintaining a state inside the component, basically in a functional component. useEffect is a one, it's more like a component did mount, and this is a one which help you to call the API in one component to other component. This is gonna call the help us mainly that API part which was missing in the functional component. Now it's completely achievable by your useEffect. And the Context talk about, so earlier what we know, suppose if I have a 3 layer of nesting component. So let me give an example. Suppose I have a 3 layer of nesting component, one component inside other component and inside one more component. I want to pass a data from this component to this component. What we have to do earlier? Now we have to first of all pass a data from here to here and as a property, and this will receive pass from here to here. So this was something that when you have to do something like that, you have to pass level by level. So this sometimes become cumbersome in terms of when with the big applications, and when it's come to a lot of layer, it is very difficult sometimes to pass the data like this. So to overcome this thing, we have come up with use context. Now use context is something that actually help you to get the data directly from a one place to other place. They have one thing called consumer and one thing called as your producer. So producer will produce it and consumer can directly consume this. So use state hook is used to manage local state in a functional component. The useState hooks accept the initial state as argument and return two variables. The first variable is the actual state and the second variable is setter function. So we don't have this dot set state here. So we specify one first variable will be my state, second will be setter of that state. Now it can be any variable name. UseState hooks replace this dot state and this dot set state method and use a class-based component. So I'll show you going forward how exactly we can manage that. So let's have a demo of how exactly we can do this. So again, we are again starting. So we have to start again with our React application. So let's create one more application. I'll say create React app. And I already told you in the Akash developer repository, you will find all the codes that you're looking for this application. Now for this, the best part is we don't have to install anything extra. Like for Redux, you have to install few things for sagas or your say routing and all, but these are native part of a React library. So we don't have to install anything separately for that. Now in this particular application, we simply open that. Let's open in the VS Code again. I'll show you how exactly we can manage a state in simple functional component. We don't make it much fancy. So let's open that Hooks app. Now, first of all, I'll just make as usual. We'll just delete all the files from here except index file. I'll keep this time because now you guys are very well aware of how to get the index file. So it's a time that we can just keep it. Before this, I was doing that because I want you guys to know how to create that. So now we just need this React. Even the strict mode is fine, and we don't need a CSS here. We don't need a service worker here. In that, we'll make one component. I'll make one component like this, and in this I make one hooks component like this .js. In the index file, I'll import that one, not this app. I'll say import hooks component that is coming from /component / hooks component, and this hooks component I'll place it here. Now next thing, so in the hooks component, let me show you how to create this time. So first of all, we'll import here React as usual from React. Then we'll say we're normal function like this. Generally we prefer like this. It's not like that hooks component can have component like this. It's not like that at all. In a normal components also, without hooks also, you can write a component like this also. It's just a function, the way to write a function. You write with arrow functions or like a normal functions. Both are completely fine. So I say hooks component. Now same way we'll have return. Now return will have one div, say in that way, and this div have one h2 tag. Although we don't prefer to use a center tag, is like a not preferred in HTML, but I'm avoiding writing a CSS and using the center tag. But I recommend you guys to write a CSS in place of this. There's a simple component like that. Now how exactly I can define the state? To define the state, we have to write use state. This is one function that you have to import. And how to use it? The syntax is like this. Say const your title. To this, we'll assign the value. We'll say use state, and suppose I write here developer funnel. Anything it will be, Edureka or anything I can write. Now this is I declare one state inside the function component. And how to use it? No need to say this dot state. Simply say state variable name, that is title like this. You created your state variable and you binded that. So let's try running this application now. We'll go inside the Hooks app and we'll start this. We'll wait for it to get started. So this is how exactly you define the state inside your function component. And that was something was a problem for us. Earlier, we are not able to define the state in the function component. See, we see there developer funnel, and that's coming directly from the state. Now, we've seen that. Now let me show you next thing, how exactly I can update that state. So to update that state, I'll define one more state variable here. So I'll say const count equal to useState, and I'll define the value of that as 0. So first of all, below this, no, we'll use one p tag and bind that count. Now I'll make one button that help to update the state. So we'll say on the click of button, we'll update this state. So I'll make one div. To this div, I'll call one on click, and there I'll simply gonna put like this arrow, and we'll say how exactly that set state get called, although we don't have any set state here. So I'll say here click me, but as I have explained you that where first part is your state and second is a setter, so we'll say set count. Now it's not compulsory to say set count, you can say any variable here. It's just act like a setter. So we'll now here I simply put curly braces. I'll say here set count, and inside this I'll say count plus 1 like this. So this is how exactly, let's try. Let's go back to browser, click, and I'm clicking, it's updating that state. See, so point is like that I'm able to set the state also and get the state also. Although it's not like that if I write here ABC also, suppose A and C by mistake, but let's try A and C only. So this will also work. Let's try. See, so first one is your actual state and second one is a setter of that state. So that's how we generally define it. So now use state with array. Now suppose I have to use state with the array. In that case also what we'll do. So I have one constant, say add number. Now I want to set the number every time user click. So on the click of that I want to add the number. So I'll say const one function called add number. Now what this do? It calls set number and pass that numbers array which I'm getting. And then it have id as number.length, value is equal to math.floor. So on the click of that, this add number generate a one random number and pass it there. And that value I can iterate and print there. How it look like? So basically when you iterate there, it's like 6, 12, 4, 1, 10, 2, 2. So basically we get the output. It means on the click, we call one function. That function actually generate one random number, and that random number get pushed to that state array, and from there we can access that. Use effect. It is more or similar to your component will mount or did mount, how we call the APIs. So let's talk about use effect. So use effect, effect hooks is used to manage the state and side effects such as interaction with browser, DOM API, and external API like fetching data, timer, subscription, request, and more. The use effect replace component did mount, did update, and will unmount methods. Component did update can be implemented by effect hook with empty array passed to second argument. Component did mount will be implemented by use effect with empty array pass as second argument. Component will unmount can be implemented by returning a function from an effect with empty array pass as a second argument. In the first case, empty array second argument when we pass it, and in the second case also will pass as a empty array second argument. So how exactly it looks, we'll talk about that. It's like a use effect. Here you have to first of all import it, and then we say set interval console.log tick. So what it do after a certain interval of time, it's keep on consoling that. Here we'll say we have one thing like you say if it's not on, then this button will visible. If it's on, then other button will visible. So we can set the value of on and off using this. So here when we talk about how exactly it work, it's help to fetch the API also. I can use like this Axios. I'm giving one URL, and basically in this whatever data we got, we just set in the state. That's another way to call that. So In short, you can say that, and you have a map operator as usual. In short, we can say that the things that we're trying to call the API and load the data, all these things can be called here, and from there as well, we can get the data. So let me show you one example of like a use effect also. Let's go back to our previous application and we call here use effect. So right like this, you'll say use effect. In this use effect, how to call the API? Call the API will anyways call one arrow function, and we can write here fetch. In this fetch, we'll give the URL, and then method also can specify. We'll write dot then. In this dot then, we can have a response arrow, and then there we say response dot JSON, whatever data we got. We'll format that in our JSON promise, and then after that, we'll get the data in next promise dot then. This data I can set to my state variable. Now in this example, I have taken that previous application URL, will give that URL. Now what I define one state variable. When I get the data, I set that in the state, and ultimately this will be your callback as your state variable name. And then we iterate over that, and let's see. See guys, we're getting the data. This is also working and we're getting the data. So ultimately the things that we do with our lifecycle hook now can be very easily be achieved by your use effect. Now use context hooks. So use context, React application can have multiple nested as shown in figure. I already explained in the beginning what that use context do. Like if you have multi-level of nesting, it helps you to pass the data from a top outest component to the very inner component. So in short, I can say that it's really helpful in that case. In passing the prop, you can pass prop only from parent component, child component. That was something we are aware of. Props from app component can directly pass to the component U. In order to pass to component W, we have to pass to component V. In order to pass to component Z, we have to pass to X and Y. This lead wrapper hell, we have more than 10-15 component. To avoid this, React 16 introduced context hook. Context provide the way to pass data through component tree without having to pass props down manually to the multiple level. React context consists of provider and consumer. Provider is defined to pass context value and consumer is defined to accept that value. The use context hook is deal with context in React. It accepts the context object and return the context value. So we have to first of all create the object called create context. We have one consumer and then we have one provider in this. Now three components are shown below. The first component Y, Z and X, Y and Z. So component X have component Y have component Z, and component Z is a simple component. Now what we can do is we have to first of all create one context component like this. We have one provider like this, multiple component kind of provider. Now we have component X and provider like this. Now what we'll do is Z is the one that act like a who gonna receive that. It's act like a consumer for this. So in short, we can say that you have one provider and one consumer. Let me show you one example for this case. I have created here one component called my context as React create context. You can give any name to that. I have created one provider which is going to provide the state of this component. Now I have one city who is responsible for consuming that, one provider, one consumer. Now let's see how they are nested. So they are nested in the way I have one country. Now country have that city consumer, and in the provider I put country. Now see, I don't have to pass any prop to country as city is a part of country and country is a part of provider. By default city will able to access that. See, city is not receiving anything from any prop. City is directly getting that from the context. It's a my context dot consumer and receiving that. This is like a multi-level nesting component can access the data from any level. Rule to write React hooks. Do hooks can only be called at the beginning of React function component or custom hooks. Hooks function name should always start with the use prefix and then name camel case, for example, use some hook name. We can use ESLint with ESLint plugin React hooks to enforce the rule of hooks. Make use of exhaustive dependencies to ensure that effect hooks, all variable being used are listed as a dependency via second argument. To automatically fix linter, warning execute npm lint means run that lint minus fix. Running the command will automatically enter all the variable being used in the effect hooks as dependencies. And what we should not do, it is not possible to use hooks in class component. In order to of hooks should never change, it is used to track value of various hooks. Hooks cannot be called inside the condition loops nested function that would change the order. And there are some additional hooks like useReference, useReducer, useMemo, useCallback, useLayout, and useDebugValue. Let's talk about that. UseReference. This hook returns the mutable reference object where current property is initialized to pass argument. Import useReference. It is used to deal with the reference of element and component in React. We can set reference by reference prop of element. Basically, it's used to refer the other component into your component, in short. As we use the reducer, no, similarly, it's very similar to that reducer to maintain the state. This hook is alternate to useState hooks and works similar to Redux library. Import useReducer from React. Const state dispatch useReducer, reducer initial argument and init. The useReducer hook is used to deal with the complex state logics. useMemo. Memoization is optimized technique where result of function call is cached and then return when same input occur. The useMemo hook allow us to compute a value and memoize it. Basically, the basic funda of that memoization is what it do is suppose you are calling that API on the listing page. You jump to detail page. When you again come back to the listing page, no, it help you to save the data and use from a cache itself. We have used callback. This hook allow to pass inline function in array of dependencies and will return memoized version of a callback function. It useful when passing callback to optimize child component. It works similar to use memo hook but for callback function. Use layout effect can be used to read information from a DOM. It is identical to use effect but only fire after all document loaded like component did mount to. And debug value is used to label the React dev tools with creating the custom hooks. Make sure to use this custom hook to display the current state of your hook as it is make easier to debug. Thank you.